Look at the size of that thing!
Dude, that's not a bear! That's not a bear!
I was inches away from feeling a grizzly's jaws crush my skull when Bigfoot absolutely blindsided the beast mid-swipe. The two titans collided so hard, the grizzly groaned like a dying animal. What happened next defies every law of nature, and I still wake up screaming, because you will not believe how this fight actually ended. It was April of 2019. That time I was one of the few women fire lookouts, and the door didn't just open, it came apart. The grizzly filled the entire frame. I was already backed against the observation window on the east wall, 80 feet above the tree line, nowhere left to go, when the second thing happened. Could whatever crashed onto the balcony possibly be worse than the bear already inside the tower? The railing on the outer balcony shrieked, not bent, not stressed, shrieked. And then Bigfoot vaulted it entirely, a shape so large it momentarily blocked the amber light coming through the window behind me, and landed on the narrow balcony walkway with a concussive boom that shook the entire tower. The grizzly spun, and for a single, crystallized second that felt detached from time itself, the bear and Bigfoot looked directly at each other through the shattered doorway while the wind screamed around the tower. Bigfoot was not a shadow this time, not a suggestion in distant timber, not another movement half hidden between trees that my exhausted brain could explain away. Bigfoot stood less than 10 feet from me now, close enough that I could see individual mats of dark, rain-soaked fur hanging in ropes along its chest and shoulders, close enough to see old scars cutting pale lines beneath the hair across its forearms, close enough to make out the strange shape of its face beneath the dripping strands plastered against its brow. Its eyes were wide-set and unnervingly pale, almost the color of stripped birchwood under moonlight, fixed entirely on the bear with a level, predatory focus that made my stomach seize. One enormous hand gripped the twisted outer railing beside it. Hands, not paws, long-fingered and disturbingly human in proportion, each one large enough to wrap around my entire skull. I could hear the railing creaking under the pressure of its grip. Water dripped from the creature onto the balcony boards in heavy, rhythmic taps. Bigfoot didn't posture. Bigfoot didn't roar. Bigfoot didn't hesitate for even a fraction of a second. The instant the grizzly shifted its weight forward, the creature exploded through the doorway like a freight train hitting full speed on a downhill grade, every inch of movement carrying terrifying, deliberate intent. The collision was not like two animals fighting. It was like two vehicles hitting each other at speed. Bigfoot caught the grizzly mid-lunge, one arm sweeping under the bear's jaw and the other clamping over its shoulders, and the momentum carried both of them sideways through the balcony railing. The wood simply ceased to exist, and they went off the edge together. If they survived that fall, what exactly was waiting for me below? I grabbed the window frame hard enough to leave my fingernails bent back. The sound of them hitting the wooden staircase below came up through the floor in a percussion of breaking lumber. Then, a wet crunch as they cleared the bottom landing and hit the mud 80 feet down. I looked over the edge of the now railingless balcony. The stairs were gone. Half the support structure on the south face of the tower had gone with them. And down in the mud and the wreckage and the yellow beam of the tower's exterior floodlight, both of them were already back on their feet. The grizzly charged first, and Bigfoot caught it by the face. Not metaphorically, Bigfoot's hand closed over the bear's entire muzzle, the way you'd grab a softball, and wrenched the bear sideways, using its own momentum to swing it in a half circle and slam it into what remained of the staircase framing. The wood exploded outward. The bear hit the ground, rolled, came up bleeding from a splinter gouge in its flank the length of my forearm, and charged again immediately. Its one good eye was glassy with something beyond pain. I'd read the weekly wildlife reports. I knew the rangers had been tracking a rabid grizzly in the sector for 11 days. I was looking at it, and I was also looking at Bigfoot, now braced between the tower's support pylons, taking the second charge full in the chest and wrapping both arms around the bear's neck in a grip that brought the whole mass of them staggering sideways into the mud. If the bear was rabid, what would happen if it actually wounded Bigfoot badly enough? I scrambled back from the window and grabbed the emergency kit off the wall hook. The flare gun was inside, orange plastic, preloaded, the kind you fire in distress. I told myself it would work. I told myself a burning phosphorus flare to the snout would drive off anything living and breathing. I got back to the broken balcony edge, knelt against the buckled frame, and aimed down at the bear. The tower swayed. Not much, maybe 4 inches of movement, but I was crouched at the edge with no railing, and my hands were shaking, and the two of them wouldn't stop moving. Bigfoot had the bear by the scruff now, hauling it backward, and I tracked the gun to follow the bear's head, and I fired. The flare didn't hit the bear. It buried itself in Bigfoot's left shoulder with a sound like a hammer hitting wet clay. The burning end went in, and for about 1/10 of a second nothing happened, and then the phosphorus caught fully, and white-orange fire bloomed against Bigfoot's fur. Bigfoot's head snapped around, and those pale eyes came straight up to where I was crouched at the edge of the balcony floor. The roar wasn't agony, it wasn't a wounded sound. It was the specific vocal register of something deeply, personally irritated, and somehow that was worse. What does something that size do when it realizes you just set it on fire? The bear used the half-second of Bigfoot's distraction exactly as a rabid, scarred, half-blind grizzly with 11 days of killing fury behind it would. Its jaws came down on Bigfoot's left thigh and locked. 300 pounds per square inch of bite pressure. The bear shook its head like it was tearing into a carcass, and even from 80 feet up I could hear the sounds that produced. Bigfoot reached up with one hand, grabbed the still-burning flare sticking out of its own shoulder, and pulled. It came out trailing a thread of singed fur and something darker, still burning in Bigfoot's grip. Bigfoot looked at the flare, looked down at the bear chewing on its thigh, and rammed the burning end of the flare directly into the bear's nose, muzzle deep. The grizzly came off that thigh like it had been electrocuted. It reared back, both forepaws off the ground, 800 pounds of scarred and smoke-stinking bear going vertical. And in doing so, it swung its full weight sideways into one of the tower's main support beams. The beam was 4x4 pressure-treated pine sunk 3 feet into concrete, and it cracked. Not broke, cracked, with a sound like a rifle shot, and then the slow, horrible groan of stressed wood finding a new geometry. The floor under me tilted enough that my knee slid on the warped boards, and I grabbed the broken railing post with both hands and hung there, looking straight down at the mud and the wreckage and the two things in it. How long before the entire tower came down on top of all of us? I needed to do something that was not staying on a tilting platform 80 feet in the air. There was a rescue rope coiled on the east side of the balcony, bright orange, rated for 500 pounds, clipped to a standpipe that was still bolted to the frame. I got to it on my hands and knees, clipped the free end under my arms in a rough harness, and went over the edge. My plan, and I want to be honest about how bad this plan was to lower myself to about 20 feet above the ground, swing toward the bear, and somehow use my presence to break its focus on Bigfoot, long enough for Bigfoot to get an advantage. What I understood about this plan and what was actually true about this plan were separated by a significant gap. What if I had just turned myself into the easiest target in the clearing? I was maybe 15 feet down, swinging gently in the night air, when Bigfoot took a step backward. The rope, my rescue rope, dropped another foot of slack and looped around Bigfoot's right ankle. I felt the jerk. Bigfoot felt the jerk. Bigfoot looked down at its ankle, the same way you'd look at a shoelace you just noticed was untied. Then Bigfoot stepped forward, into the bear, and the rope went taut. Bigfoot's foot came up about 4 inches and then stopped because I weighed 132 pounds and was attached to the other end, and then Bigfoot went down, not gracefully. Bigfoot went down the way a sequoia goes down, with absolute commitment and a sound you feel in your molars, and the bear was on top of it before it finished falling. What happens when the only thing holding the bear back suddenly hits the ground? I was now dangling 3 feet above a bear that was actively mauling Bigfoot. I could feel the heat of both of them. I could smell the wet fur and iron smell rising off the whole mess. The rope was still looped around Bigfoot's ankle, pulling taut and going slack as things moved below me, and I was swinging like something hung in a tree to dry. The bear was working at Bigfoot's ribs with both forepaws. I watched the claws open lines in the fur, watched a dark blood sheet down Bigfoot's flank, and Bigfoot had both hands around the bear's lower and upper jaws, respectively. What followed was not something I want to reconstruct in detail, but I will tell you that the sound of a jaw being forced open past the limits of its natural range of motion is a sound you do not forget and cannot unhear. And the blood that came off the bear's face when Bigfoot did it went across my boots in a hot spray. The bear's tendons popped like snapped cables. The jaw hung wrong. Even with its jaw destroyed, would the bear finally stop fighting? Bigfoot head-butted the bear, full force, top of the skull against the side of the bear's head, and the bear's grip broke and it staggered sideways. And then Bigfoot's free hand found the rope above its ankle and pulled. I went up, fast, and then I went sideways, and then the rope either broke or came free of the standpipe because I was suddenly flying through the dark in an arc toward the tree line, and there was a Douglas fir coming up very fast. I hit it with my left shoulder and both legs and dropped. I fell 10 feet into mud that was cold and deep enough to swallow my forearms to the elbow when I landed in it. I lay there for 3 seconds that felt like 5 minutes, cataloging damage. Nothing broken, a lot bruised, mud in my mouth, still alive. I got my feet under me. The tower was groaning above and to my right, the south face visibly canted now, the floodlight swinging in an arc that turned everything below into alternating shadow and harsh white. Bigfoot was back on its feet. The bear was back on its feet. They were circling. Bigfoot's left shoulder was a mess of singed fur and oozing phosphorus burn. Its thigh was dark and wet where the bite had been. Its ribs were crosshatched with claw lines. The bear was missing its upper jaw function, was streaming blood from both nostrils, and was still coming, still moving forward, still fighting. The damage assessments in the weekly reports had said this bear had been gored by an elk 3 months prior, had been shot with a rubber bullet twice by a ranger response team, had survived a vehicle strike that totaled a pickup truck. I believed all of it now. If that bear could survive all of that, what would it actually take to kill it? Bigfoot grabbed the bear and they went down again, and I knew I needed to do something useful. In the back of my mind, I was running through the contents of the tower: rifle, radio, signal mirror, emergency kit. The emergency kit was a smoking ruin somewhere in the wreckage of the stairs. The rifle was still up in the tower. I had the signal mirror in my vest pocket. I pulled it out. It was early enough in the evening that the floodlight was catching the low-hanging cloud cover and bouncing back, and I thought I could angle the mirror and hit the bear's good eye and blind it for a second. 1 second of hesitation might be enough for Bigfoot to end it. I angled the mirror. I tracked the bear's head in the oscillating floodlight. I found the angle, but the mirror hit Bigfoot directly in the face. Bigfoot was mid-lunge, full extension, coming down on the bear from above when the reflected beam crossed those pale eyes. The lunge didn't stop. Instead, it deflected. Bigfoot's entire trajectory shifted about 4 feet to the left of the bear and terminated against a granite boulder half buried in the mud at the tree line. The sound was a dense, flat crack. Bigfoot shook its head like it was trying to clear water from its ears, and the bear capitalized immediately. It came in from the right, the side Bigfoot couldn't see coming in that moment, and put both forepaws on Bigfoot's back. The claws raked down. I could see the damage from 30 feet away. I could see it, and I put the signal mirror in my pocket and said nothing because there was nothing to say. At what point does helping become the reason someone dies? Bigfoot spun. The speed of it was shocking. Something that large moving that fast should not be real, should not be possible. But Bigfoot spun completely around with one arm already extended and caught the bear's right forepaw mid-swipe. The grip locked. 2 of the bear's toes went backward with a crack that carried across the clearing, and the bear's next sound was something I'd never heard a bear make before. High, ragged, almost confused. It backed up 2 full steps backward, which was the first time I had seen this bear retreat from anything. Bigfoot was blinking hard, still clearing the light blindness, shaking its head in sharp, short movements, and then it focused and charged. The 2 of them collided chest to chest and tumbled down the rocky slope that ran toward the tree line's lower edge, end over end, a mass of limbs and sound, crashing through the undergrowth and taking down 2 saplings on the way. What was waiting for them down in the darkness beyond the floodlight? I still had a radio. I hadn't thought of it until this exact moment. It was clipped to my vest on the left side, a handheld Forest Service VHF, already tuned to the emergency channel. I pulled it free and keyed the transmit button. I got halfway through my call sign when the antenna cord, a coiled extension I'd clipped to the radio's port to boost range on the tower, caught on a fallen branch. I yanked it free without looking because I was watching what was happening at the bottom of the slope, and the cord came free of the branch and swung out and looped around Bigfoot's ankle for the second time in 10 minutes. This time, Bigfoot went face first into the bear's waiting mouth. The bear's jaws closed on Bigfoot's shoulder. The broken lower jaw meant it couldn't get full bite pressure, but it didn't need to. The upper teeth were sunk in, and the bear was shaking, and Bigfoot's roar was immediate and total and loud enough that I felt it in my chest cavity from 40 feet away. Bigfoot drove one knee up into the bear's throat. The bear's grip loosened for a half second. Bigfoot used it. Bigfoot rolled, and in rolling, the antenna cord pulled me off my feet and dragged me across 15 feet of rock and root before I even processed what was happening. I was a sled. I was a 132-pound sled being dragged over broken terrain by a cord attached to a 9-foot cryptid who was fighting a rabid grizzly bear. If the cord didn't snap first, which one of us was going to break before this fight ended? I hit a rock with my hip, then my shoulder, then I let go of the radio and the cord went slack, and Bigfoot grabbed it above the loop at its ankle and snapped it in half with one pull. The cord whipped back and caught me across the cheek, and I lay in the rocks and breathed for a moment. Below me, Bigfoot had found something, a fallen tree limb thick as my thigh and about 5 feet long. What happened next with that limb and the bear's throat is the kind of thing that doesn't translate cleanly into language. But the bear gagged, and then the bear vomited blood, and then the bear staggered backward. Bigfoot stood in the wreckage of the slope with the limb still in hand, spat something out of its mouth, and watched the bear compose itself for another charge. How much damage could something survive before survival itself stopped making sense? I needed my canteen. I also needed the gas can for the generator, which was stored in the same equipment locker beside the base of the tower, and both of them were in the same color, same profile, same weathered olive military surplus profile. I had grabbed the canteen before. I was almost certain I had grabbed the canteen. I opened the lid by feel because the floodlight was doing its swinging arc thing and the shadow was on me, and I brought it around and threw the contents at the bear's face as hard as I could at a range of about 12 feet. The smell hit me before the logical deduction did. The bear recoiled from the gasoline, hitting its eyes and muzzle, shaking its head, and I was already knowing what I had done before I finished knowing it. The bear's face and the upper half of its shoulders were soaked in accelerant. Bigfoot, who had been moving in to follow up on the gag and stagger, changed course immediately, both hands grabbing the bear and hauling it sideways, away from me, which was the right instinct and saved my life, because half a second later, a spark from the dangling, snapped wiring on the damaged tower's south face hit the mud where a gas runoff trail had been pooling from a cracked generator line I hadn't even noticed. The ground between me and the tower went up in a ribbon of blue and yellow flame that widened as it moved. Once the fire started running, was there any direction left that wasn't about to burn? Bigfoot's left arm caught. The fur went up the way dry grass goes up, fast and total. Bigfoot let go of the bear and hit the mud, rolling, and the flame went out in a wet smear of dirt. But the bear was now a burning, shrieking, 800-pound mass of raw panic and fuel, and it was charging, not at me, at the first source of motion, which was Bigfoot, rising from the mud with a blackened forearm and singed fur across its left side. The bear charged, and Bigfoot ran, not away from the fight, toward the small pond I'd used for water pump intake testing, 40 yards north of the tower base, glinting in the light from the burning ground. The bear chased it through the fire. I watched the two of them, the burning bear and the singed, still bleeding Bigfoot, hit the pond surface at a dead run and go under. If neither of them came back up, what was I supposed to do alone in a burning forest? The steam was immediate and enormous. The pond surface roiled, the fire on the bank bent toward the water and guttered out in the edge of the pond's moisture radius. Then the surface went still, and I stood there in the dark and the smoke with a gasoline-wet empty can in my hand, and nothing moving anywhere. The bear surfaced first. It came up in the center of the pond, still smoking off its burned fur, the ruined jaw hanging in that wrong geometry, and it found its feet in the shallows immediately, still moving, still upright, missing an eye and trailing smoke, and bleeding from 4 different locations, and still pointing itself at the bank with its one good eye. Then Bigfoot surfaced behind it. Bigfoot's hand closed on the back of the bear's neck, and the bear went back under. I was already moving. I didn't decide to move. My legs just started, and I was scrambling up the wreckage of the tower's exterior ladder before the first rung broke under me. It broke at the second rung from the bottom. I came down hard, jammed my palm on a broken piece of stair framing, and then the third rung broke when I tried again, and then the entire ladder section from 4 feet to 8 feet let go at once, and I fell 6 feet into the mud for what felt like the 14th time tonight. I sat there, The ladder was gone. The rifle was still up in the tower. I sat in the mud at the base of a structurally compromised fire tower with no ladder and decided the rifle was staying up in the tower. Without the rifle, what exactly was my plan if either of them came out of that pond alive? In the pond, something broke the surface. Then something else. Then they were both under again. I heard the plane before I saw it. A small fixed wing, probably a spotter plane running the fire check circuit at 8,000 feet. Navigation lights blinking patient and slow in the smoke-hazed sky above the ridge. My last flare was in my vest pocket. The emergency channel radio was in two pieces, somewhere on the rocks. A signal flare at the right angle would be visible from a spotter aircraft at that altitude, would bring a response within 20 minutes, would bring actual help. I pulled the flare out. I had one. One strike, one shot. I scored it against the ignition strip on the side of the flare casing, and it caught immediately, burning hot white in my hand. And I was already moving it in the S pattern for aerial distress signal when I fumbled it. The flare hit the dry grass at the base of the slope. The grass was already soaked in gasoline runoff from the cracked generator line. I understood this in the same instant that the grass understood it. The fire didn't spread so much as arrive. A wall of it, 10 feet tall, moving toward the pond and the tree line and the tower and me from every direction that dry gas-soaked grass existed, which was most directions. The bear, which had surfaced again, shrieked at the sudden wall of light and heat at the bank. Even with a broken jaw and a missing eye and everything else, the bear could still read. Fire! It came out of the pond at a run. When fire closes every exit at once, where does anything trapped inside it even go? Bigfoot was already out of the water. I watched Bigfoot in the 30-foot firelight, soaking wet in streaming mud and blood and pond water, and watched Bigfoot track the charging bear with those pale eyes in a way that looked less like a fighting animal and more like something making a final calculation. The bear closed the last 10 yards in a second and a half. Bigfoot caught it, both hands, full grip, the bear's momentum absorbed in a locked stance with both feet driven into the mud for purchase. And then Bigfoot pivoted, a full 180 rotation using the bear's own weight and speed, the way you'd spin something on a chain, and at the end of the rotation, Bigfoot let go. Where do 800 pounds of momentum go once something stronger takes control of it? The bear went into the fire wall, not glancing, fully into it, shoulder deep, and the burning brush took it, and the shrieking went up, and then down, and then the brush moved and settled and went quiet, and the grizzly did not come back out of it. Bigfoot stood at the edge of the fire with the flames reflecting in its eyes. The fur on its back and arms was singed in patches down to the skin. The left shoulder was still oozing from the flare wound. The ribs were open in at least 4 places I could count from where I stood. The thigh wound from the bite had stopped bleeding actively only because the heat and the mud had caulked it. Bigfoot turned around. After everything it had just survived, what was it about to decide to do with me? Those eyes found me in the firelight, and the expression in them, if expression is even the right word for what a face that large and that old can carry, was not gratitude, was not recognition, was not warmth. It was the specific look of something that has exhausted its patience entirely and made a decision. Bigfoot crossed the distance between us in 4 strides, grabbed the back of my jacket collar with one hand, and picked me up. I left the ground. Bigfoot ran. The fire was closing from the north along the ridge where the gas runoff had spread furthest, and from the south where the dry grass slope had gone up, and from the east where the tower's broken wiring had started a creeping burn in the duff. The western corridor was narrowing by the second. Bigfoot went west through that corridor at a speed that made the trees on either side of us blur into a continuous texture of bark and dark. I was over its shoulder, hanging face down, watching the burning ground recede and then not recede, and then get closer again. Embers were coming down through the canopy in slow, orange arcs. One landed on my neck, and I didn't have the presence of mind to do anything about it. How long could that shrinking corridor stay open before the fire swallowed it too? Bigfoot leaped a fallen log that was already burning along its full length. The jump cleared 8 feet of clearance. I went up and came down hard on Bigfoot's shoulder and felt something in my collarbone complain about it. We hit a dry stream bed, and Bigfoot took it at a diagonal, footing on the rounded stones absolutely certain. No slip, no hesitation. The fire was visible on both sides now, moving through the understory with the horrible efficiency of a fire that has plenty of fuel and a good draft coming down off the ridge. The smoke was getting thick enough that I was coughing into Bigfoot's fur and couldn't see more than 40 feet in any direction. Then Bigfoot stopped. The ravine was 40 feet wide and dropped away to a gully floor that was itself on fire. Burning debris from upslope had fallen in, and the dry brush at the bottom had caught. 40 feet of open air with a wall of flames 30 feet below. The firelight coming up from the gully floor lit the smoke from beneath and turned the whole sky above it copper and moving. On the far side, the tree line was dark. The fire hadn't crossed yet. Bigfoot stood at the edge and looked at the gap. I stopped coughing long enough to understand what I was looking at. I grabbed 2 fistfuls of fur and locked my arms. Was this the only path left, or just the least impossible one? Bigfoot didn't slow down. Bigfoot took 3 running strides from a standing start and left the edge of the ravine at full extension, and for a moment that I will never be able to accurately describe, we were in the air above. 40 feet of burning nothing, with the fire below us and the smoke above us and the copper light coming from everywhere and nowhere, and the far edge of the ravine was coming up, and then it was there, and Bigfoot's feet hit the solid ground of the far bank, and we were over. The landing drove Bigfoot down to one knee. I slid forward off its shoulder and hit the ground on my feet for once, stumbling but upright, and I turned around and looked at the ravine. The corridor we had come through was gone. The fire had closed it. Behind the curtain of smoke and flame, nothing was moving. The bear was gone. Had the fire finally ended the chase, or had it only hidden whatever was left behind us? Bigfoot was still on one knee. The fur on its back was burning, not smoldering, burning, a spreading lick of flame that had caught in the singed patches on its shoulders and the back of its head during the run through the burning corridor. I grabbed my canteen, the real one this time, the water one. I checked before I opened it, and poured it over the back of Bigfoot's head and shoulders. The flames on the shoulder died. The ones on the lower back didn't. I didn't have any more water. I didn't have anything else. I stood there with the empty canteen and watched Bigfoot stand up. And now that the fire was still burning and we were both out of options, what was Bigfoot going to do next? The pale eyes found me one more time. I don't know what was in them. I don't know what category of thing I was looking at, and I was closer to it than I had ever been, 3 feet away in the firelight on the far bank of a burning ravine in the dark, and I still don't know. Bigfoot turned away from me. Below the bank, at the bottom of the next drop in the terrain, I could hear water, the river, moving fast, swollen with snowmelt from the high ridges. Bigfoot walked toward the sound. The burning patches on its back moved with it, lighting the trees as it passed between them, and then Bigfoot went over the edge of the bank and the sound of the river rose, and then there was a splash that swallowed every other sound in the night.